And of course, the economy, one of the first things to take a hit this morning. Of course, the pound has cratered, falling to its lowest level in over 30 years. Lots of shock on the markets. In fact, we can cross now to our business editor, Stephen Carroll, who's standing by for us at the Paris Stock Exchange. Stephen, what sort of reaction have you been seeing in these last few moments?
The Paris Stock Exchange, of course, is about 45 minutes away from opening here, and everyone is preparing for what will be a very rough day. I've seen one market analyst describe it as a vile and ugly day on the markets. So the share values you can see behind me, those green figures, are yesterday's closing figures. We're expecting a sea of red when the Paris Stock Exchange opens. Of course, there'll be a similar picture across London and Frankfurt as well. Let's take a look at what's been happening on the currency markets. The pound, as you said, hitting that 31-year low in trading, down some 10% against the dollar, falls too against the euro as well. The single currency for the Eurozone also falling in trading too. That's down about 3% a short time ago. On the stock markets in Asia, we've already seen a reaction on shares as well. The Nikkei in Tokyo down some 8%. The Bank of Japan there saying that they're standing by to help if needed. Falls too in Hong Kong. And interestingly, those shares that are listed in Hong Kong that have an exposure to London, particularly the bank Standard Chartered, HSBC, the mining firm Rio Tinto, their shares down all around 10% in trading as well. And we can expect sharp falls when the European stock markets open in about 45 minutes' time. We're seeing London called lower by about 8%, a very significant fall. I've seen some estimates that up to 15 or 20% could be wiped off European equity values as well. But of course, much of the focus of what's been happening overnight has been focused on currencies and focused on the pound sterling. And for more on that, we can go to London and speak to Jane Foley, Senior Currency Strategist at Rabobank. Jane, thanks for joining us on this busy day. Can you please put in context for us this fall on the pound, an absolutely dramatic drop? How does this fit into what we've seen in previous decades?
Well, actually, we've had an 11% fall in the pound versus the US dollar. It is off its lows, though. It is off its overnight lows right now. Now, 11% movement, that is a huge movement in any scale, but we must say that it's still not the sort of movements that we've seen in other politically created environments over the last, say, 30 years in the pound. That said, this news will continue to play out over the weeks, over the months ahead. 8 o'clock this morning, we're expecting a statement from Prime Minister Cameron. Perhaps then we'll know more about his future immediately in terms of his position in government. Will he be here to steer us through this very messy divorce proceedings which are just about to begin, or will he indeed step down? And if he does, of course, we have more political uncertainty in the UK. Now, of course, political uncertainty, very bad for currencies. It does create volatility. But, of course, a lot of this political uncertainty, of course, will also be pushed towards Europe. Other countries perhaps evaluating their positions in the EU after this Brexit vote. So again, huge amount of political uncertainty in Europe likely to open up, and this of course creates question marks over its impact on the economy in Europe, and that too creates uncertainty for currencies. So I think only one thing is really certain at this time, and that is for currency markets certainly we've got a lot of volatility about to play out in the months ahead as some of these political uncertainties get questioned first, and then we begin to see answers.
There's been some estimates today of much more dramatic falls in sterling to come. What you're saying with that uncertainty is that could we see sterling go much lower than where it is now?
It certainly is possible. For instance, already the market is anticipating that several central banks could be cutting interest rates because perhaps this uncertainty will lead to a more depressed outlook for growth in a number of countries, of course, including the UK. Now, whether or not that happens, of course, very much will depend on what happens with investment, what happens with growth over the next few months. It's going to be very difficult to try and guess that at this juncture. So if we do have a significant significant economic impact on the UK if that does begin to open up. Yes, it will impact the Bank of England outlook. It will impact the currency. Now, we've got to also remember that the UK is a current account deficit country. Now, what that means in essence is that we need international savers to come in and plug that gap. It could be, if we don't get inward investment because of the political uncertainty, that sterling could notch significantly lower. But one thing that I would say is that this is not a black swan event. This is something that we've been aware that could happen really for some time, and that means a lot of investors will be positioned for that, and that certainly will have deadened some of the shock that many of us are feeling this morning.
OK, Jane Foley at Rabobank in London, thank you for your time this morning. As I say, European markets now just over half an hour away from opening here in the Paris Stock Exchange. Like in London, like all across Europe, there are safeguards in place. If we see dramatic falls in shares, automatic suspensions will kick in on some of these big companies if their share values drop over certain ceilings. And of course, we'll be following that all closely for you throughout the morning here on France 24. But for now, it's back to the studio.
Thank you for that, Stephen.